The Way We Were, where we unearth a thread of continuity in cinema, music, art, culture, society, and politics to discover the connection to each other.
Hi, this is Rima, and you're listening to The Way We Were. And this week, I wanted to talk about the three-part documentary, Angry Young Men, the Salim Javed story on Amazon Prime Video. I found it to be engrossing, but a tad dissatisfying. I felt that it gave us an intimate glimpse into the homes and family dynamics of Salim Khan and Javed Akhtar, but it does not give us enough insight into their craft and their influences. We are told they're avid readers, but we don't learn about the writers they were inspired by or the books that seeped into their scripts. If you remember Kala Patthar, Yash Chopra's film, there is a sea storm sequence in it, for instance, which was inspired by Joseph Conrad's Lord Jim, the book which everybody knows about. And then there was a scene in Trishul where Sanjeev Kumar is being brainwashed by his mother to betray the woman he loves. And that was straight out of the Fountainhead, And the two writers have also not asked during the course of the documentary about the writers who paved the way for them, like Wajahat Mirza, who wrote films like Ganga Jamuna, Mother India, and Mughal-e-Azam. And if you think about it, Diwar and Shakti borrowed the premise of Mother India and Ganga Jamuna. And the duo also borrowed little bits from the cinema that they possibly loved growing up. So they turned Ram or Shyam into a feminist entertainer in the 70s, which we know as Sita or Geeta. Sholay was heavily inspired by Mera Gaon, Mera Desh. And in the same film, they paid a homage to Dilip Kumar by recreating a scene from Gopi, where Farida Jalal pretends to be the voice of Bajrang Bali. Even Basanti's Dhanno in Sholay was named after Vaijayanti Mala's character in Ganga Jamuna. The documentary adds very little to what we already know about Sholay. Janjeer and Diwar, or is it Zanjeer? Yes, it is Zanjeer and Diwar. It adds very little to what we already know, though it has some deeply moving bits about how the two writers struggle to survive, to earn respect and etch their names in the history of Indian cinema. But I feel it would have been so much more satisfying to see them in the same frame and hear them talking about the process behind their writing, and especially their best known and least known works. No time is spent, for instance, on their solo works post their split, like Salim's 1986 film Naam or Javed's Sagar, Mashal and Arjun. Arjun in particular reinvented the angry young man in the 80s, but nothing is said about that one. And among their shared screenplays, nobody says anything about Kala Patthar either, which was one of their most complex screenplays. It gave us a coal miner on a mission, an idealistic engineer, a spunky scribe, possibly one of the earliest depictions of a woman journalist played by Parveen Babi, a village doctor, a dream seller played by Neetu Singh, and a troublemaker played by Shatrughan Sinha against the backdrop of poverty, corporate greed, and an overarching message of humanism. And its dialogues crackled like nobody's business. Not to forget the small touches, that new filmmakers borrow these days, like Tadbir se bigdi hui takdeer bana le, playing in the background as a few coal miners play cards. And one of my favorite films of Salim Javed is Shakti, which had a historic star cast and some of the best dialogues we have heard in popular Hindi cinema. But that film is also largely ignored in the documentary. The point is that Salim Javed did not just write screenplays. They gave us the language to articulate our fears, our hopes, our joy. And they showed us who we were and who we could be. And they were storytellers who emerged at a time when the nation was just beginning to discover its fault lines. Their films reminded us of our best impulses as a nation, our humanity, our humor, our faith in goodness and in truth. They told us that our courage to stand up for each other would redeem us and save us in the end, no matter how bad things got. Angry Young Man, or rather, Angry Young Men, yeah, it's a plural, is star-studded, it's a bit starry-eyed, and it shows us who Salim Javed are as human beings, but it just falls short of showing who they were as writers and how they crafted the language the way it had never been used before. A language we still look back upon or, hark back to when we run out of words. However, we shouldn't think that they were the only definitive voices of Hindi cinema. Let's please not forget other writers who came before them, who not only enriched Hindi cinema but also gave us a nuanced vocabulary that influenced, us and helped us to speak about love, injustice, and human values in a very articulate way. One of such writers was Rajinder Singh Bedi. And he was also one of the leading lights of progressive Urdu poetry and narrator of the tragedy of partition, of the violence that was unleashed against women during that time. He was also a very intuitive observer of human nature, and his cinematic dialogues opened windows into aspects that Hindi cinema had not explored before him. He wrote sparkling dialogue that we still repeat without knowing who wrote it. He wrote dialogues for films like 1954's Mirza Ghalib, 1973's Abhiman, 1969's Satyakam, for which he won Filmfare Best Dialogue Award, 1960's and Anuradha, 1966's Anupama, 1955's Devdas, and Musafir, 1957, Madhumati as well. And for Madhumati, he won Filmfare Best Dialogue Award as well. And so many more films he wrote. And 2 years after he passed away, one of his original works, Ek Chadar Maili Si, was also turned into a film. As a director also, he was quite successful, and he wrote and directed the psychological drama Phagun, which was released in 1973, which explored for the first time in Hindi cinema the mother and daughter relationship in a very realistic way. He also wrote and directed 1970s film Dastak, which portrayed toxic masculinity much before the term was coined and showed how it could affect marital relationships. I think Rajinder Singh Bedi's understanding of life and politics came from the fact that he had lived through partition and he had seen post-independence India grappling with very complex social and economic issues. And his, I think, films that he wrote for Hrishikesh Mukherjee and Bimal Roy, they are the gold standard for film writing. And what his work represents is both realism and idealism, and that's why his stories still remind us of our potential as human beings who can fail but can still find their way out of darkness. And how can I forget Abrar Alvi, who was also part of a certain era of cinema that put idealism and artistic integrity above commercial gain. Bia Chopra, if you remember, collaborated again and again with Akhtar Mirza, who was the father of director Saeed Akhtar Mirza, and just as Raj Kapoor worked with Khwaja Ahmed Abbas. Abrar Alvi was an integral part of Guru Dutt's cinema. And he wrote landmark Dutt classics like Aar Paar, Mr. and Mrs. 55, Saha Bibi aur Ghulam, Kagaz Ke Phool, and Pyasa. His best work, I feel, was marked with personal and socio-political conflicts India was experiencing at that time. And his stories were about Indians from all walks of life. And his meeting with Guru Dutt was very, I think just meant to be on the sets of bars in 1953, when he gave a random suggestion to Guru Dutt about a scene, and Guru Dutt gave him Aar Paar, his film, to write. And from then on, they shared perfect synergy. And Guru Dutt even asked him to direct Sahabi Aur Gulam. And even though there is still a lot of controversy about who really directed it, everybody who was involved with the film said that it was Abrar Alvi. And the film won national and Filmfare Awards. It was also screened at the Berlin Film Festival in June 1963. And it was India's official entry to the Oscars. But Guru Dutt, passed away shortly afterwards. And Alvi never directed another film, though he continued to write hits like Professor and Sangharsh, and also wrote H.S. Ravel's monster hit Laila Majnu. And what he represented also was the ideal of working with a higher vision of what cinema could be. And it wasn't just a purveyor of entertainment for him, it was about stories that mattered. And yes, I will not forget Khwaja Ahmed, Abbas, who was literary and creative genius, a 4-time National Award-winning director, journalist, novelist, and progressive writer who penned, believe it or not, over 300 short stories and 73 books in English, Hindi, and Urdu. And the IPTA co-founder also wrote the best films of Raj Kapoor and also a column called The Last Page, which continued for over 43 years in Blitz magazine. And he also directed many films, shorts, and also a documentary called Char Sheher Ek Kahani. He was also extremely socially aware because he was born in the family of thinkers and poets. And his grandfather, Khwaja Ghulam Abbas, was in fact one of the leaders of the 1857 Sepoy Mutiny. And he was the first martyr of Panipat to be blown from the mouth of a cannon. And his father was a scholar, and Abbas himself graduated in English literature and studied law at Aligarh Muslim University. And he also directed a film called Sheher Aur Sapna, which was about the struggle to find a home in an very, overcrowded city. And the last scene of the film where the heroine is delivering a child, even as the only home she has ever known is about to be destroyed by a bulldozer, sums up who Abbas was. He knew the fault lines in society about the divide between the rich and the poor and the dehumanization of marginalized communities in cities and villages. And most of those stories are still relevant. And of course, he also made a film called Dharti Ke Lal, which kind of heralded the neo-realistic wave in Hindi cinema in 1946, which was later carried on forward by Bimal Roy and Satyajit Ray. And so there's a lot about him that really, needs to be celebrated, including films like Dr. Kotnis Ki Amar Kahani and the internationally celebrated Neecha Nagar, which was his tribute to the Nehruvian dream of a conscientious, upright Indian who would always do what was right. And with Avara and Shri Char Subis, he also mourned the loss of Gandhian innocence in a fast-changing society. Even in Raj Kapoor's very opulent films, he painted the conflict between privilege and deprivation. Even in Bobby, which is, often dismissed as a teenage love story, Abbas, pitted two men of different faiths and economic backgrounds against each other and threw their children in the mix. And he also is credited with introducing none other than Amitabh Bachchan to the industry in his film Saath Hindustani. And I want to conclude this journey of cinematic writing with Rahi Masoom Raza, whose signature statement, Main Samay Hoon, gave us the definitive Mahabharat of our times. He also won the Filmfare Award for Best Dialogue 3 times for films like Main Tulsi Tere Aangan Ki, Tawaif and Lamhe. But it is with B.R. Chopra's Mahabharat that Rahi Masoom Raza gave us an epic that was a treatise of our time. It's a work that reminds us still how everything in the end is about the search for truth and not power, love and peace, and not hatred and war.
The Way We Were, where we revisit the past to understand how the ebb and flow of popular culture shapes the way we are. Only on The Podcaster.